The neighborhood had always been quiet in its own predictable way. Lawns trimmed to identical lengths, hedges shaped like soft cubes, mailboxes painted in the same neutral palette. Everything about the community suggested a comfort built on routine. Yet beneath that carefully maintained surface lived an undercurrent of tension, a simmering energy generated by the one resident who seemed determined to uphold the rules not just strictly, but obsessively. Her name was Marlene Havers, though nearly everyone in the subdivision referred to her simply as Karen. Marlene had lived on Maple Crest Lane for years, long enough to memorize every bylaw ever drafted by the HOA, long enough to believe she alone understood how the neighborhood should function. She took that responsibility seriously, far more seriously than anyone else wished she did. Residents had grown accustomed to seeing her pacing along property lines with a clipboard or standing at her window with binoculars, searching for the next infraction. Still, nothing could have prepared them for the week she decided to escalate. It began subtly on Monday morning when the city's code compliance office received a single complaint from her address regarding a potential lawn irrigation violation. The targeted homeowner had been confused but not alarmed. After all, this happened occasionally. But as the day progressed, more complaints trickled in, 5 of them, all from the same person, all alleging different minor violations by different neighbors. The city filed them just as they were required to, but noted the volume with mild irritation. By Tuesday afternoon, that irritation had turned into disbelief. 12 new complaints landed within 2 hours, all typed in precise, formal language, all citing obscure municipal codes. She reported her next-door neighbor for allowing a trash can to remain visible for more than 40 minutes after pickup. She accused another resident of operating a commercial-grade leaf blower, even though the neighbor in question used only a small electric model. She even reported a house 3 streets over for emitting excessively cheerful holiday lighting, despite it being only late spring. The city staff started joking among themselves about the sudden surge. One officer joked that the neighborhood must have descended into chaos overnight. Another suggested they create a dedicated inbox just for her reports. But protocol forced them to process every submission, no matter how petty or exaggerated, so each entry was logged, time-stamped, and placed into the queue for inspection. By Wednesday, however, the tone shifted from humor to concern. The volume of complaints had doubled again. Several inspectors finally headed to Maple Crest Lane to check a handful of the most urgent entries. They found nothing, not a single violation remotely matching the claims. One inspector noted that the reported structural hazard on a resident's porch was merely a welcome mat needing to be shaken out. Another report of hazardous runoff turned out to be nothing more than a neighbor washing pollen off a car. The city employees began to wonder what exactly was happening inside the house at the corner lot, the one with the perfectly symmetrical planters and the security cameras pointed in all directions. The staff debated whether a resident could simply be lonely, or seeking attention, or perhaps experiencing something deeper, but the calls continued regardless. By the end of Wednesday, the complaint count reached 23. Maple Crest Lane itself was beginning to feel the strain. Neighbors whispered to each other at mailboxes, cautiously glancing over their shoulders in case Marlene was watching from behind her curtains. They had seen her pacing more aggressively than usual, scribbling on her clipboard with rapid movements, sometimes stepping onto other people's lawns to inspect a flower bed or measure the distance between a driveway edge and the curb. Some residents suspected she was intentionally provoking them, hoping they would slip up. Others believed she was simply spiraling into a level of obsession no one could reason with. By Thursday morning, the neighborhood group chat was filled with anxious messages. People wondered whether they should confront her, appeal to the HOA board, or simply wait for the storm to pass. But the storm wasn't passing. It was gathering strength. By noon, the complaint count had reached 30. A new wave of reports accused residents of everything from misaligned recycling bins to possessing non-compliant garden ornamentation. One family received a notice stating they were under investigation for a potentially hazardous trampoline, even though they didn't own one. The city finally reached a breaking point. The sheer number of complaints, all coming from a single individual, triggered an internal review. Staff combed through the reports, comparing them, noting patterns. Each one seemed oddly precise, almost rehearsed, As if she had a template she filled out relentlessly. The inspectors exchanged looks of growing concern. Filing false complaints was not illegal on its own, but intentionally wasting city resources could have consequences, especially when the volume was this extreme. Late Thursday afternoon, one senior inspector pulled up an aerial map of the neighborhood and frowned. He noticed that nearly all the properties Marlene had reported surrounded her home in a tight ring. She seemed to be targeting nearly everyone she could see from her windows or her daily walking route. Nearly everyone, except herself. He wondered. Then, why she had remained so fixated on everyone else's compliance yet had not appeared on their records once for an inspection of her own home. If she were truly committed to following regulations, he thought, she wouldn't mind having her property evaluated too. Still, she had never requested it, and no complaint had ever triggered one. But the rules worked both ways. A surge of false reports gave the city authority to investigate the reporting party as well. And so, shortly after closing hours, an internal memo was sent out authorizing a full inspection of her property, not as retaliation, but as a procedural requirement following excessive, inconsistent reporting activity. Friday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation. The inspectors assigned to the case drove to Maple Crest Lane with clipboards, cameras, and digital measuring tools. Residents watched from afar, pretending to weed gardens or collect newspapers as the city car slowed before the infamous corner house. For a moment, the street felt eerily quiet, almost as if holding its breath. The inspectors approached the property and immediately noted several irregularities. The front hedges extended well beyond the acceptable height limit. The decorative lighting installed under the eaves appeared improperly wired. A garden path constructed of hand-poured concrete slabs had no visible permits on file. Even the mailbox, that symbol of Karen's self-proclaimed authority, leaned slightly over the boundary line, a clear violation of the very rules she weaponized against others. All of this was documented carefully and methodically. The inspectors, once amused by the excessive reporting, were now feeling something closer to disbelief. It was as though she had become so focused on policing her neighbors that she had neglected her own compliance entirely. And this was only the front yard. The true surprises awaited behind the fence, the side yard, and the locked patio storage she assumed no one would ever examine. As the inspectors moved deeper onto the property, the list of violations grew longer, more complex, and significantly more serious. And with each new discovery, one thing became increasingly clear. The woman who had filed 37 complaints in a week was about to face consequences far greater than any she had tried to impose on others. The chapter closes here, on the edge of revelation, as the inspectors prepare to uncover the most incriminating violations yet, each one pulling them deeper into a story they never expected to unravel. The inspectors moved cautiously along the side of Marlene Haver's property, their tools and recording devices capturing every inconsistency. At first glance, the yard seemed meticulously maintained. Shrubs clipped sharply, gravel evenly spread, paving stones arranged in symmetrical rows. Yet the closer they looked, the more the precision resembled a veneer, a thin layer hiding a disorganized truth. Behind the row of shrubs lining the side fence, they discovered discarded materials stacked haphazardly. Rusting metal stakes, broken terracotta pots, old lengths of PVC pipe, and a roll of fencing wire tangled into a sharp nest. A faint smell of mildew lingered in the air, hinting at moisture trapped between the piles. According to municipal guidelines, such materials needed to be stored properly or disposed of altogether. The inspectors photographed everything, shaking their heads silently as they documented each violation. Just beyond the cluttered corner sat a wooden shed. Its paint had begun chipping beneath the midday sun, revealing an older, darker layer underneath. The inspectors checked the city permit database and found no record of approval for its construction. In fact, the setback requirements for accessory buildings were strict, and the shed appeared to sit far too close to the fence line. They took measurements, confirmed their suspicions, and marked the structure as non-compliant. The shed's door creaked when they nudged it open, revealing a dim interior filled with stacks of containers. Extension cords coiled in tangled loops, and several cans of paint past their expiration dates. A portable generator sat near the back wall, unmistakably industrial in size, with wires running upward toward a small ventilation cutout. The inspectors exchanged glances, recognizing that an unpermitted generator, especially one not properly ventilated, posed a significant safety hazard. They recorded the discovery meticulously as they stepped out of the shed. One inspector noticed the yard's drainage seemed unusual. A narrow trench snaked along the fence line, partially hidden by decorative stones. Following it led them to a homemade drainage outlet that emptied directly into a shared alleyway behind the property. This was a serious violation. Redirecting runoff onto public or communal spaces could cause erosion or damage, and multiple complaints had been filed citywide over similar issues. The irony was not lost on the inspectors. While Marlene accused others of causing runoff problems, she was secretly contributing to the very issue she claimed to crusade against. Continuing along the property, they reached the backyard gate, secured with an oversized padlock. City regulations allowed inspectors to access outdoor areas when investigating a pattern of false reporting, so one of them contacted their supervisor to confirm the protocol. Upon receiving the green light, they proceeded to unlock the gate using the approved method provided by the department. When the gate swung open, it revealed a shocking contrast to the rigidly manicured front yard. The backyard looked like an ongoing construction project abandoned long before completion. Scraps of lumber were piled near the fence, half-cut boards protruding like broken ribs. A makeshift workbench stood with tools scattered across it, many of them rusted or weather-worn. A collection of bricks lay scattered in uneven stacks, some forming incomplete outlines of what might have been planned as a patio addition. The inspectors quickly realized that none of this had been approved by the city. Every structural adjustment required a permit, even small projects. They assessed the brick formations and unassembled wooden frames, concluding that a series of unauthorized DIY renovations had taken place. Based on the quantity of materials and the stage of disarray, it appeared the work had been going on for months, possibly longer. Near the back corner of the yard, they found a tall, vine-covered trellis leaning against the fence. The structure stretched several feet above the allowed height limit. Beneath its shade, a small table held several containers of chemical plant treatments, some unlabeled, others clearly marked as restricted-use products requiring special handling. These would need immediate attention. Improper storage of chemicals was not just a code violation but a serious health concern. The inspectors systematically documented each discovery, filling pages of their notes with violations, hazards, and inconsistencies. And yet, even after recording so much, they sensed more remained unseen. Something about the odd arrangement of the backyard caught their attention. The ground seemed uneven in certain areas, almost subtly raised. A closer examination revealed patches of soil that looked freshly disturbed, as though recently dug up and hastily covered. They carefully prodded one of the raised patches and quickly uncovered evidence of buried trash. Plastic bags, old newspapers, and broken household items partially decomposing beneath the dirt. It was an illegal dumping site, one she had created in her own yard. The inspectors documented it with growing disbelief, questioning how someone so focused on policing others had allowed her own property to fall into such negligence. But the final and most revealing discovery came when they approached the large storage bin placed along the back fence. At first, it seemed like a typical outdoor container for gardening tools or seasonal decor. But when they attempted to open it, they found the lid stuck. With some effort, they finally lifted it, only to reveal a mass of tangled electrical components. Coils of cable, extension cords plugged into power strips, battery packs, and several small household appliances wired together in an arrangement that made no clear sense. The inspectors paused, absorbing the scene. It resembled an amateur attempt at building a makeshift power distribution hub. Perhaps it was meant to run multiple devices from a single outlet, or maybe it was part of the unpermitted generator setup. Regardless, it was dangerous, potentially even fire hazardous. This alone would merit immediate intervention. By the time the inspectors concluded their assessment, the list of violations had grown so long that it nearly rivaled the 40-page HOA bylaw document Marlene so frequently quoted. They stood in the center of the backyard, surrounded by scattered tools and half-finished projects, and took a moment to reflect on the bizarre contrast between her relentless policing of others and her disregard for her own property. It became clear that someone so fixated on controlling her surroundings had lost control of her own environment entirely. Perhaps it was a slow unraveling, a gradual slide she no longer recognized, or perhaps she had always assumed no one would ever dare investigate her. The self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards. When the inspectors finally locked the backyard gate behind them, they carried with them enough documentation to justify a full enforcement action. A formal report would be drafted, violations categorized, citations issued, and deadlines set. The process would be thorough, fair, and entirely within the bounds of city regulations, something she had counted on to use against others but had never expected to be applied to herself. As they walked back toward their vehicle, a few neighbors discreetly watched from afar, pretending to tidy their gardens or retrieve packages. They had recognized the city's emblem on the car and understood, at least vaguely, what it meant. Word would spread quickly, even without a single conversation. The woman who had filed 37 complaints in 1 week was now, unmistakably, the subject of a sweeping investigation. What the city would discover next, inside the property itself, would push the situation far beyond simple citations. It would uncover a truth so startling that even the inspectors would need to return with reinforcements. The stage was set for consequences larger than anyone on Maple Crest Lane had anticipated. Over the weekend, news of the investigation seeped slowly through Maple Crest Lane, spreading from doorstep to doorstep in hushed, speculative whispers. Nearly everyone had become aware that the city had uncovered significant issues on Marlene Haver's property, though none knew the full extent. Some residents felt vindicated. Others felt uneasy, wondering what exactly the inspectors had found that required multiple follow-up visits and additional personnel. By Monday morning, 3 city vehicles returned, this time accompanied by a representative from the fire department and a building safety official. They parked with quiet deliberation along the curb, stepping out with a certain level of caution. The inspectors from the previous visit had flagged something unusual, something significant enough that the department heads wanted to see it firsthand. The team moved with practiced coordination, retracing the path through the side yard and toward the problematic areas documented earlier. The fire department representative focused on the sheds, the generator setup, and the questionable electrical hub discovered in the storage bin. He examined each with growing concern, noting the hazardous wiring, lack of ventilation, and makeshift connections that could have easily led to a fire or electrical surge. He marked several violations as immediate hazards requiring correction or removal. As the team proceeded, the building safety official focused on structural concerns. He measured the height of the trellis, inspected the unfinished patio foundation, and assessed the trench carved through the yard. Everything further confirmed the initial findings: unpermitted work, improper construction, and unsafe modifications. But the most alarming discovery lay not in the yard but inside the house itself. The inspectors had initially hesitated to consider entering the home. Normally, interior inspections required consent or a pressing safety concern. Yet during the previous visit, they had noted electrical cords disappearing through a cracked window leading into the home, cords that suggested the hazardous generator setup was linked directly inside. This provided sufficient justification for a limited safety inspection of interior wiring and connection points. With procedural steps followed meticulously, they approached the front door. It opened with a soft creak, revealing an entryway that felt strangely still. The house did not mirror the manicured precision of the front yard. Instead, it had an atmosphere of crowded order, structured but overwhelmingly cluttered. Papers lay stacked in towers on side tables, binders filled with printed municipal codes lined the hallway walls, and bulletin boards displayed pin charts, calendars, and neighborhood maps with small colored markers placed at certain homes. The inspectors glanced at each other, understanding immediately that her fixation extended far beyond surface-level policing. The house seemed to serve as a headquarters for her self-imposed monitoring program, a physical representation of her escalating obsession with neighborhood compliance. They moved carefully through the home, checking each space systematically. The living room was filled with filing boxes labeled with categories such as noise, pets, yard maintenance, and suspicious behavior. Each box contained printouts, handwritten notes, and photographs of neighbors' homes taken from various angles. Some were dated years back, indicating that her surveillance habits had not started recently. They had simply intensified. The kitchen contained signs of long-neglected cleaning. Dishes stacked unevenly, small appliances left unplugged on cluttered counters, and faded sticky notes taped around cabinet doors with reminders and self-made rules. One inspector observed that the household environment mirrored the backyard, Project started, systems half-built, but nothing completed or maintained. When they reached a small hallway leading to the basement stairs, they noticed the same electrical cords previously traced from the generator. They ran along the wall, tacked in place with strips of clear tape, leading downward. The fire department representative gestured for the team to proceed slowly. The basement door groaned open. A rush of cool, musty air greeted them, carrying the scent of cement dust and old cardboard. The steps creaked under their weight as they descended, shining flashlights ahead. What they saw first was the source of their concerns: an unpermitted electrical setup branching from the generator cables. It powered a row of small appliances, old computers, plugged power strips stacked on other power strips, and a series of cameras aimed at multiple monitors. The screens displayed various angles of the neighborhood: front lawns, driveways, sidewalks, and even portions of backyards. Images captured illegally through extended zoom lenses and elevated mounts attached to her upstairs windows. This was more than simple overvigilance. It was unauthorized surveillance. The inspectors realized the gravity of what they had uncovered. Her system not only recorded footage of neighboring properties without consent, but archived it into digital folders labeled with detailed descriptions. It was a level of intrusion few neighbors would ever have imagined. The building safety official documented every detail meticulously. The fire department representative assessed the electrical hazard and concluded the setup posed immediate danger of overload. The city inspectors recorded that a formal case would need to be opened due to privacy violations, electrical hazards, and unpermitted construction. The discovery changed the tone of the entire investigation. What had started as a simple code compliance review now included possible criminal concerns. The city team had to remain objective, yet it was difficult not to acknowledge the weight of the situation. They wrapped up their inspection, sealed the basement entrance with an official notice, and completed the remaining documentation throughout the house. When they finally stepped outside, the neighborhood felt oddly quieter than usual, as if even the air was waiting for the next move. Within 48 hours, the city sent an official notice to Marlene Havers. It outlined over 30 violations, some minor, many severe, and required immediate corrective action. It also notified her that the unauthorized surveillance system was being referred to higher authorities for review. For someone who had spent years policing others, the sudden scrutiny directed at her was unprecedented. Neighbors watched as she received the stack of notices, though none approached her. Many speculated that she had never expected consequences, never considered that her own property might fall under the same rules she wielded so aggressively that in the following days, the neighborhood began to shift. Residents felt a strange sense of relief. The constant fear of being reported, scrutinized, or targeted diminished. Mailboxes were checked casually again. Yard work resumed without anxiety. Children played more freely on driveways. Meanwhile, Marlene remained indoors, blinds drawn. The usual sight of her patrolling with clipboard in hand vanished entirely. No new complaints were filed. No suspicious photographs were taken. Her oppressive presence faded from daily life almost instantly. But the final twist came weeks later, after the city completed its formal review. A report circulated quietly through official channels, revealing that she was not simply violating rules. She had been the most non-compliant resident on Maple Crest Lane for years. Dozens of unpermitted changes, long-term storage violations, hazardous setups, and privacy breaches all pointed to a troubling pattern. Her obsessive attempts to control others had been a distraction from the growing chaos in her own home. And when her own violations came to light, the weight of her actions collapsed upon her with full force. In the end, the woman who filed 37 complaints in a week faced one of the largest citation packages the city had ever issued to a single homeowner. The irony was undeniable, and the neighborhood felt a collective shift. A reminder that those who scrutinize others most intensely often have the most to hide. And as time passed, Maple Crest Lane returned to its calm, predictable rhythm. This time without the looming shadow of the one resident who had watched everyone else but never expected to be watched herself.